See You Now is a podcast highlighting the innovative and human-centered solutions that nurses are coming up with to solve for today's most challenging healthcare problems. Created in collaboration with Johnson & Johnson and the American Nurses Association and hosted by nurse economist and health tech specialist Shawna Butler.
So universal health coverage, although it sounds actually quite bland in a way, in fact, it means health care for everybody, everywhere. And that's a massive undertaking for our world today. But nevertheless, it's possible. And it's possible because we have such a technologically developed world that we can do this if we want to do it. And we have to have the will to do that.
Hey, podcast listeners, it's Shawna Butler, and this is See You Now. May 12th is International Nurses Day. The date was intentionally chosen to commemorate the birth anniversary of Florence Nightingale. Born in 1820, the British nurse, social reformer, and statistician is best known and appreciated as the founder of modern nursing. Walk into any healthcare setting, and the influence of her ideas, research, advocacy, and innovation endure and continue to inspire. To mark the moment, we are returning to an earlier episode, a pre-pandemic episode, with another pioneer in nursing, Barbara Stilwell, the executive director of the Global Nursing Now campaign, and listening with an altered, heightened understanding and urgency in raising awareness of the impact nurses have in transforming health systems. We're listening for a few reasons. On May 24th, thousands of nurses from around the world will gather online for the culmination of the successful 3-year Nursing Now campaign. Marvel at its rapid growth into a highly visible, active network that connected nurses globally and provided some important lessons to take forward in building the next era of health systems, health innovations, and nursing's key roles in shaping them while simultaneously elevating the nursing profession. Nursing Now has shown the power of acting together and finding powerful allies to tackle big, long-standing problems like gender and economic inequality, while also improving health outcomes. We're also going back for another listen as the World Health Organization moves full speed into their Back the Frontline 2021 designation of the International Year of Health and Care Workers, a campaign and hashtag highlighting the urgent need to invest in health workers for shared dividends in health, jobs, economic opportunity, and equity, and to address the global health work shortage, which projects that 18 million more health workers are going to be needed in the next 10 years to achieve universal health coverage by 2030. Half of this shortage, 9 million, will be nurses. As nursing is the largest occupational group in the health sector, accounting for nearly 60% of the world's health professionals, the Real Game Changers episode and Barbara's insights, observations, and recommendations that nurses need to be in every health policy, discussion, debate, and decision remain as relevant, perhaps even more poignant today, given the COVID-19 pandemic, as when they were originally aired in February of 2020. And with that, See You Now shares our appreciation for nurses and our allies and our champions everywhere on this International Nurses Day. So let's get on with the show.
I'm Barbara Stilwell. I'm the Executive Director of the Nursing Now Global Campaign. And I came to this job from a job in international development, which I'd been in for 12 years, where I had really seen the need for a better, more focused health workforce that was going to be able to help us achieve universal health coverage. And before that, I worked with the World Health Organization on health workforce, which again led me to see that the world is so short of health workers that we're very unlikely to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals unless we do something about that. Hence my enthusiasm for nursing.
You mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. So how is nursing tied to the Sustainable Development Goals?
So the Sustainable Development Goals are very broad and ambitious, and they address not only health in its sort of purest form, but also women's health, economic development, climate. And all of these areas are areas that nursing is involved in. We know that if you develop nursing, it has a triple impact. It develops not only people's good health, but it also has an impact on the number of women coming into the workforce. So it helps support gender equality when women don't have opportunities and chances to work. And it also supports economic development in two ways. One is through supporting women to contribute to the workforce. But secondly, and very importantly, if you don't have a healthy population, you're not going to have people in work paying taxes. So improving health improves the economic outlook of any population. And so nursing has a key triple impact in that way, but it also does on other areas, nutrition, healthy development for children, ending poverty, all of those things. Because nursing is a broad church with a biopsychosocial approach to health.
And the universal health coverage and the universal health access. Back in 2015, nations around the world were all in agreement. This is important. So why is it important, and what happens when we achieve universal health access and coverage?
Universal health coverage is critical because it means exactly what it says. It's health coverage for everybody, everywhere. And we know already that there are millions of people who won't ever see a health worker in their lives because of problems with distance, with accessibility to somebody that will understand them, or with just being able to access any equipment or medicines that they might need. So problems of supply chain and so on. So universal health coverage, although it sounds actually quite bland in a way, because it's really meant to signify people not having a huge out-of-pocket expenses. It was built around the idea of healthcare that wasn't outrageously expensive for the poorest people. But in fact, it means healthcare for everybody, everywhere. And if you just think about that, it's huge. Everybody, everywhere. Not 80% of the population, but everybody. And that's a massive undertaking for our world today, overcoming some of the challenges and simply having health workers out there. But nevertheless, it's possible. And it's possible because we have such a technologically developed world that we can do this if we want to do it. And we have to have the will to do that.
There's so many different data points around why universal health coverage and access. And it dramatically lifts people out of poverty. I remember Melinda Gates at a couple of presentations that she's given. She always asks people about how are we going to turn around poverty? And she asks, what is the technology that has had the greatest impact on alleviating poverty? And you can see people kind of, scratching their heads thinking, they'll come up with something that is over in a different field, but she just always surprises people. She says it's family planning and making sure that people have access to care, that it is pregnancy intention. And it goes back to, if you want to lift a group of people out of poverty, people can't work, they can't get educated if they're not healthy. And so where there has been universal health coverage and access, that's where we've seen a dramatic shift in a population's overall growth, development, vitalization. What are the opportunities that you're seeing that maybe other people don't because they're not looking at it through your lens or your global perspective?
I'm not sure that other people don't see opportunities, but I think it's important to understand that to provide universal health coverage is a really complex issue. Even if, as you were saying, to provide family planning, which is critically important. And, of course, Melinda Gates is absolutely correct, as I would expect her to be. But I would say that you also have to understand that, first of all, you need the governance in the health system. So the people in charge of the health system have to be allocating the resources in such a way that there's then the workforce to deliver what you need to deliver. There's the supplies and the pharmacology, the pharmacy whenever you need it. And there's also the logistics of getting everything out there to the places it's needed. And that, I think, is an understanding that I bring from my previous life to this job in nursing now. And in some ways, it's been a real thrust to get more nurses into the workforce. Ever since I was at WHO, that's been one of the goals. But more nurses in the workforce on its own is not going to solve the problem. And in fact, it's not even going to be a solution, because if you train more nurses, you've got to have more teachers, you've got to have more clinical placements so they become competent. Then you've got to keep them in the workforce. So you've got to have salary and incentives to keep them, and you've got to place them where they're needed. And all of those issues are tied up with universal health coverage. And that's why we don't have it in many, many countries, because we need the governance that can give the oversight to plan those services. And often that's what we don't have. A lot of the solutions are actually you can say they're simple solutions, but they're actually very complex when you get right down to it. And I think it's that knowledge of complexity that helps me, I think, to see with other people in this campaign and on my team that we have to have a broad vision, a broad optic to look at how things are going to change, and to target policymakers and politicians to also look at this broad optic with regard to nursing. We trip over evidence generated by nurses and have a lot of nurses who can champion that evidence. However, what we don't have are non-nurse champions who will listen to it and present it, to government and to the purse holders, to the policymakers. And I think, that's the weak link.
So the Nursing Now campaign, can you give a history and an overview and the aims?
Sure. So the campaign started in February 2018, and it was started really out of the interests of an all-party parliamentary group in England, which was chaired by Lord Nigel Crisp. And this group examined the impact, or the potential impact really, and the challenges to nursing globally in achieving really health for all, universal health coverage. And what the group found in their report, which was called Triple Impact, was that while nursing had this potential triple impact on health, gender equity and economic development, it was often not realised because there was insufficient investment in nursing, and that nurses were not allowed, often either by law or by regulation in the countries they practiced it, to work to the top of their licence, which means they were trained to do things which they were then not allowed to do. And one, that was true actually wherever you looked at nursing. So even in the UK, for example, it took years and years for nurses, although they were taught how to prescribe, to get prescribing rights. If you go to places in lower income countries, nurses often have very advanced practice and extended roles, but they have no policy to help them practice in those ways. So the goal of our campaign is to improve health by raising the status and profile of nurses. And what we're aiming to do is to we have, I think, got a social movement going already. We're already in over 100 countries worldwide. We have over 300 groups now, Nursing Now groups, and that has just grown exponentially. And I believe that's because there's a real readiness in nursing to step up and really to see what nursing can achieve. So, for example, now there's a big movement in Africa to develop the advanced nurse practitioner program, family nurse practitioners in primary care and specialist nurse practitioners. And that's one of our goals, is to show what advanced nursing practice can achieve around the world with different health populations. We're also working with young nurse leaders to try to change the perception that nursing is women's work, should be, it's just women's work. Anybody can do it. It's not very sophisticated. We really want to get this message out there that nursing is highly sophisticated, complex, and can really meet many health needs. All health needs will only be met in a team, but nurses can lead those teams. And so we're trying to develop leadership skills across the board through our partners, ICN, WHO, other partners here, and develop young nurses, which we're doing through the Nightingale Challenge next year, which is a challenge to employers of nurses to put 20 young nurses through a leadership development program that will help them see how nursing should interact with policy and policy makers so that nurses are at the policy making decision or in the policy making decision making rooms, which they're currently not. We believe nurses should be at every high level discussion, every talking heads program about health that's on the telly. Nurses should be in those programs, and currently they're not. They're almost invisible in many countries. So our quest is to raise the visibility of nurses so that they can contribute fully to improving global health.
You're listening to See You Now. I'm your host, Shawna Butler. We're talking with Barbara Stilwell, the Executive Director of Nursing Now. Nursing Now is run in collaboration with the World Health Organization and ICN, the International Council of Nurses, and aims to improve health by raising the profile and status of nursing worldwide. Barbara mentioned that the number of Nursing Now groups is growing exponentially. And just to give you a sense of what she means, we're now into February of 2020, and the number of groups has almost doubled since we spoke with her in October of 2019. And over 600 employers in 66 countries have accepted the Nightingale Challenge, enrolling almost 26,000 nurses in leadership development programs. And like she said, this is not happening without cooperation and collaboration. By partnering with ICN, the Federation of more than 130 national nurses association that represents over 20 million nurses worldwide, Nursing Now is poised to make real headway, particularly by focusing on the leadership development of young nurses, and largely because of the work of this type of quantum collaboration. But will it be enough? Let's get back to our conversation. This is See You Now, and I'm Shawna Butler. So the Nursing Now campaign, it is addressing the urgency because there is a looming shortage that we are not going to get around just because of the aging demographics and the demand and need. There is raising the visibility of what nurses do, what they have done and what they can do. And it is putting nurses in policy and leadership roles at all levels such that the health and the health delivery and the health outcomes of populations can be dramatically improved.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay.
And we want leadership at all levels. Yes, we do. But we also do want to see leadership at the top levels too, and real leadership, not people put in positions with no budget and no staff.
Yeah. And people say nurses need a voice at the table. My response has been, we have a voice. What we don't have is a budget, influence, decision-making, and accountability.
Yes, exactly.
And those are the game changers.
They're the game changers, exactly they are. And we did a big survey last year, 2,500 nurses around the world with the support of Johnson & Johnson and IntraHealth International. And this is exactly what we found. Nurses said, I could really be successful in a senior leadership role if I had budgetary discretion. And it's the old story that you put somebody in a leadership position because you have to. Because somebody says there's no women or there's no nurses. So you put them in the leadership position, but you don't give them a budget or an adequate budget. And you don't give them any staff. So at the end of 2 years, you say, well, what have they done? Nothing. See, I told you we didn't need one.
And you very close to that report. Can you comment on that? What was your takeaway?
Actually, it was interesting, that report. I came away, I expected to see the gender issue really at the top of the reasons why nurses didn't feel they could progress in leadership. And it wasn't at the top. It was more these practical things like I need the equipment and I need the budget and, I need an enabling environment to enable me to be a leader. However, having said that, there are really critically important gender issues, which, you're right, it's very difficult to talk about them because it sounds like we've put on this old broken record, it's just because we're women, we can't get on. But if you look at the results of what our study and what people said, and also the results of other studies. I mean, it's not just our studies. Other studies will lend weight to this. There is this glass escalator, that takes men to the top. And part of the reason for that is because women are seen as having family responsibilities. And in fact, they do have family responsibilities. So what we're really talking about, is a very big shift in the ways that women and men think about their roles and their responsibilities. And really, nursing should be representative of the population. So it should be 50% men, 50% women, and all the other, diversities that are in populations. But it never, ever has been, because nursing is seen as women's work. And that is still very detrimental. And what I've noticed is that, people like ministers of health, they step up to the podium and they say, I love nurses. I have a sister who's a nurse. She's wonderful. She's a wonderful woman. None of them have ever said, I have a brother who's a nurse yet, or a father. And so we need to move beyond the, aren't they wonderful, scenario to investing in nursing can bring you a return on your investment in the following ways. And we haven't really got that conversation going.
You wrote a remarkable editorial, Breaking the Silence, A New Story of Nursing. And you addressed that so well. I think it was back in early 2018 that you wrote that.
Yeah.
It seems timeless, and it tells the story that's been happening for decades, maybe even centuries, around the understanding or the perception of nursing and women's work. Now that the campaign is underway, is any of this changed? Are we making progress? If you were to rewrite this, what would you write differently?
I'm not sure you could yet write anything truly differently, to be honest. However, I think I would add in that we need, as nurses, the gender question is undoubtedly of critical importance. And, we talked about the Me Too movement in that, breaking the silence. And I do believe that it is the sort of, it is the synchronicity of the Me Too movement and Nursing Now in many ways has driven Nursing Now. I also have come to see over the last 18 months that nurses are not nearly political enough. They have an image of being nice, and that tends to play out in the way that nurses are. And nurses are not politically astute. So somehow don't develop the political language to make the cases, that they need to make to politicians about investing in nursing. And I've been reading quite a lot of Mary Beard recently about women and voice. And I realised that nurses are seen as complaining, whiny women. They're not seen as making a point, which men would be seen doing. If these were male doctors, they'd be listened to. They'd be on the radio, making a point. But nurses are seen as whinging. And I'm very struck that Mary Beard points this out time and again about women and voice, that when women make a complaint, it's seen as, whinging and they need patting on the head.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a couple of nurse researchers about this, and they made the observation nurses are very, very, very good about identifying problems. So they lead with the problem, and that may be part of the perception of why there is a higher rate of complaining rather than putting forward solutions. Thinking about what you mentioned earlier about access to care in relationship to what problems nurses are identifying, the other part of that enablement and building workforce capacity is using technology to remove the geographic boundedness, using something like an AI or a chatbot or virtual care. There's so many new possibilities, and what that requires is a regulatory framework and a system that is designed to reflect how we've progressed as a civilization with our science and our technology. And it sounds like at Nursing Now and this movement with all of these different clusters and hives of activity, nurses are really thinking about how to meet people and deliver the care where it's needed in new and different and I think really exciting ways.
I think that's true, Shawna. And I think particularly among young nurses who they're the ones that really realize the potential of technology. And what having a platform of connectedness can do for you. But I think, there are exciting developments in pockets in many places, but they're not being rolled out as rapidly as perhaps they could, I think.
What is your thought about curriculum evolving? When we think about how we're preparing all of our health professions, what are some of the innovations that need to happen at the curriculum level so that the caring professions that we are training today are prepared for the situations we have yet to imagine?
We have to be, as a profession, I feel, we have to be building our curricula in a way that allows the maximum flexibility, and we should be going for the guide by the side, not sage on the stage model. So I think it's a case of having many more demonstrations of how things can be different and how they look and how they work. When I look back on my training, which was, when Abraham was a lad, was a long, long time ago.
The dinosaurs were walking the earth at that point.
They certainly were. We were putting bandages on their legs. No, it was a long time ago. And, that is a phrase I use sometimes in just talking about the world, really, then and now, is I could not have imagined what this world today would have looked like when I was training as a nurse. And, yet that has a wonderful possibility, because if you can only imagine it, it might actually come to happen, come to be. And if I could really reform nursing curricula, I would put a politics module in it about, the importance of politics and policy and economics.
When I read the Triple Impact Report, one of my favorite lines in here is, much of what is said here will be familiar to nursing leaders, but they alone cannot bring about the changes that are needed. Politicians, non-nursing health leaders, and others must work with them to create radical changes in how nurses are perceived and in what they are permitted and enabled to do. So who are those nurse champions, politicians, economists? Who are they?
Well, we have identified a number of nurse champions and non-nurse champions for nursing now. I think, we have a lot of really, in nursing, in the profession, really smart nurses. I mean, really beyond smart, some of them, just amazing. Our deputy chair of our board is Sheila Clough from South Africa, Botswana, and she's fantastic. She was a Minister of Health. She's a wonderful champion for nurses. And we have, so many, especially in the USA, so many nurse academics who really understand, the number of nurses that are needed to provide good care. I think, we need champions in all of the areas you're talking about. We definitely need economics champions. We need to show the return on investment, the way they did in, the UN report on investing in the health workforce. We need one of those. I'm hoping State of the World's Nursing will bring that dimension to show, that nursing is a good investment, that there is a return on that investment, as well as good healthcare, employment. We have some champions like Professor Srinath Reddy from India. He's one of our champions, as is Atul Gawande. So we have champions from outside the profession. What we need to do is to get all of us, them and us, talking more in a smarter way about what nurses and nursing can bring to the health system. And the strongest nurse champions are the ones, I think, who move outside nursing into either politics or some sort of other arena, So on our board, we have Baroness Mary Watkins of Tavistock, who was a mental health nurse, but was also Vice Chancellor of a university and is now in the House of Lords. And so she talks politically. And I think that's really important. To me, that's our weak link.
So you're in full support of my admonition when I tell nurses, start going to the technology and policy conferences. Go to the forbidden places.
Yes.
Go to the places where you're new and novel and you're sharing an insight that people in housing or law enforcement or food systems or data science are not familiar with.
Absolutely. And, the only people who do those are people like prison nurses or forensic nurses, who are with teams that are predominantly not nurses. So they really make their presence felt. But interestingly, those are the people who are largely silent in the nursing arena. So, what we've tried to do is provide a platform to bring these diverse groups together so they can talk to each other.
Yeah, you mentioned that there are Nursing Now groups in over 100 countries. What are these groups doing?
Well, they've all got their own agendas, their own things they want to accomplish by being a Nursing Now group. So, for example, in Jamaica, they're working on gender-based violence because it's a huge problem. In Northern Ireland, They're working on men nursing and homelessness because they're two big issues for them. In the UK, they're working on the image of nursing, trying to change this sort of feminine, women's work image of nursing. So, depending on where you are, each country has its own agenda. And some of them are really ambitious. Mexico has a very ambitious agenda of what it wants to do. It wants to put 350,000 young nurses on the Nightingale Challenge, which is great for us. We've met our results right there.
I love reading through all of the Nursing Now groups on their social feeds. Yeah. And I look at that as this rich source of ideas. In England, the CNO role, where nurses go into different schools, in the primary schools, and they have Team CNO, and they're encouraging young students to pursue becoming a chief nursing officer. And so they go in, they explain and share with them this vast range of experiences that are available to nurses in all the different ways that they can have impact in their community and country and globe, and then put them in their scrubs and they create the Team CNO. I just love that. And every time I go into the social feeds to see what they're doing in Sweden or in Australia or with the midwifery groups or pediatric nurses, it's just bubbling with great ideas. And so for me, when I've encouraged other groups to join and form, they'll say, well, why? Is it because you don't have to reinvent the wheel? Somebody else is already doing it. You just go and take their template, or you amplify it or join it. So what's your pitch to people or nursing groups to join Nursing Now?
Well, what we tell them is how successful Nursing Now groups are at bringing together the diverse players, the stakeholders in a country. So you can't start a Nursing Now group unless you have professional association, chief nursing officer, education, WHO if it's in your country, young nurses and non-nurses. All those people have to be in the group before it can be approved as a group. So what it's done is it's created a platform for all of these nurses to start talking to each other. We give them the opportunity to post their photos and talk about their work, write a blog if they want to. So, what we're trying to do is to really make that global platform an open platform for everybody. And we're going to do that with the young nurses too, with these 20,000 young nurses next year. Allow them to be linked to each other wherever they are. Nursing Now is the first opportunity nurses have had to really create a social movement. And I think it's been possible because of social media. And if you think about, times when nurses there have been many, but times when nurses' voices have been heard, it's tended to be small group or individuals. But we've actually reached, the second stage of a social movement. We've kind of got organised and we've got communication between groups. So in my view, 2020 is going to be a once in a lifetime, certainly for me, opportunity for nurses to really look for a different future together. So that's what drives me forward with this campaign. I think we can really make substantive change in 2020.
That is brilliant. And count me in. Call on me, and I will be there standing at your side.
I will, Shawna.
With the campaign reaching its culmination, we checked back in with Barbara at her home in the UK to get her thoughts about how it's all unfolded and what's been learned. First of all, it's just so nice to talk with you.
It's nice to see you, Shawna.
Yeah, I'm just glad that we were able to talk and try to get some feedback from you. So, Barbara, how has the pandemic been for you?
Me personally?
Yeah.
So for me personally, it's been a very different time, the things about self-compassion that we've run for nurses have really resonated with me. And as far as the campaign goes, I think nursing has been more visible than ever before, and yet in some ways still invisible, which has been a real learning journey. Because although nurses have been hailed as heroes and applauded, they still have not been seen at ministerial tables or on the media. Why not? If we're heroes, why aren't we there talking about what we're doing? And, of course, in the UK, and I think in other places too, we've been hailed as heroes and offered a 1% pay rise, which is insulting, you know? Yeah. So nurses have been both visible and invisible, and that's a really important message going forward. We need to start getting our messages out there to politicians, not only talking amongst ourselves, which we do really well.
I had asked you to share the goal of the Nursing Now campaign,
Mm-hmm.
and where you said it was our campaign is to improve the health by raising the status and profile of nurses, and that there was this, you believe that there was this real readiness in nursing to step up and to really see what nursing can achieve. How close is the campaign coming to reaching those goals?
We've just been writing the final report, so this is very top of my mind. And the thing is about Nursing Now is it's not one story, it's many, many stories from around the world. And the groups, you know, we ended up with over 700 Nursing Now groups around the world. And all of the groups have a story to tell about things they've done. They've done amazing things, especially considering there's been a pandemic. And some of them have focused their work on the pandemic and what they've had to do to respond. I'm thinking particularly of Spain, which has been really hard hit, and the USA as well. I think the USA has had nurses flying around the country to hard hit areas, you know. If that's not responsive, I don't know what is. I mean, it's been extraordinary. So everywhere has got stories to tell. That's what we have to remember about a global campaign is it has to be contextualized wherever you are. And you can have global goals, which we did have. And I think people really stepped up to those. Where the biggest change has been in young nurses. And that's partly the pandemic, but it's also that young people think differently about everything, about life, about work-life balance, about connectedness. And what we found is that nurses really have benefited from being connected to each other globally. And so in some ways, the pandemic has facilitated that because everything we've done has been virtual. So we've been more global, really, than we would have been without the pandemic, I think, because every single event has been a global event. And that's been wonderful. What we've learned is everybody has something to teach and everybody has something to learn. And that is a huge lesson. And that is the lesson I really want to take forward, me personally, from this campaign, is we need to look at how we remain connected and how we continue to share. We've had an initiative called the Global Solutions, which has really been about bringing people in to look at issues and challenges in nursing and looking for new solutions. And people have really stepped up to that. So the health landscape is changing. You know, as we move out of the pandemic, everybody is concerned not only with staying healthy, but with flourishing. How do we flourish? How do we not lose what we've learned about connectedness, about not killing the planet? What are those messages for nurses? That's become very important for us. What do we learn about how we remain responsive and strong in the face of rapidly changing health landscapes? And those are things that we shouldn't lose. And I think nurses have a big role to play in that.
Barbara, do you have a sense of how we're going to flourish and how we stay connected?
For my part, I've been talking with senior global colleagues about how we might set up networks of connectedness. using infrastructure that's already there, like the WHO collaborating centres. I mean, they're there. We have internet, we have collaborating centres, we have universities, but what we don't do is set up action learning sets where people can join and bring problems and issues and talk about them. So I'm talking with senior colleagues about how do we use these networks? How do we set up joint action learning among people who potentially are already connected? For young nurses, it's a whole different world out there. Young nurses have set up WhatsApp groups on their own, and they've kept them going for years during the campaign, and those they're not going to end. And older nurses like me, we need to look at how we can get in on the edge of those and, share and be responsive, as well as setting up some of these more formal things.
Your assessment of where we are in having a presence in policy-making roles. When we spoke back in 2020, you talked about that was being one of the goals of Nursing Now. And what we needed to do was to move into the highest levels of leadership. Were those advancements, did they actually happen? And are they going to stick when the urgency and the acuity of the COVID-19 pandemic lessens?
It's hard to answer, but let me say this. One of the things we've done with our leadership report that we looked at nurses as women and leaders is I and my co-principal investigator have written an article. Basically what we've said is nursing needs to continue to have its own social movement, like suffragettes. We need to be difficult, noisy. We need to be all the things that when women do that, men say they're being difficult and they're being pushy and they're being male and they're being aggressive. We need to do all those things because that's the way that you change things. And we were really privileged to have a conversation with Mary Beard, who's a sort of real national treasure here on women and power. And Mary Beard said, people don't know enough about what nurses do. They think medicine, they know what doctors do, and nurses do what's left. Mary Beard said that. We have to be much better at going along and saying, why are you not listening to us? When people call you difficult and pushy, you've just got to think, okay, I'm difficult and pushy, and I'm going to keep saying it. And we've kind of got to get that attitude back into nursing. And it was there. Nurses were suffragettes back in the beginning of the last century. Nurses were suffragettes. And in America, nurses were frontier nurses, and they were pushy and they really got the job done. And it's that culture that we need to be nurturing. And I think with the young people we have these days, their boots were made for walking, and we need to support them.
You commented 18 months ago, you said, I've come to see over the last 18 months that nurses are not nearly political enough.
Not as a profession. We're getting there. There are more nurses now who are becoming ministers of health and politicians, and our presence is beginning. But if you look back at votes for women, it was originally women who were 30 and over, and gradually we were enfranchised. And that's what we need to do with nursing, not give up. This Nursing Now campaign has been a fabulous opportunity. We've really raised the profile of nurses, and nurses have been emboldened to speak out. They've got their president to the launch of Nursing Now. We've got the Minister of Health of Russia speaking at our final event, which is fabulous. Who'd have thought it? But we've got to go on. We've really got to go on, and we've got to be determined that 50 years' time, things will look completely different for nurses. Nurses will be everywhere. We did a final edition of the Nursing Times, and in it, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cambridge interviewed a midwife in Uganda, Harriet, a nurse midwife actually, who was a big part of Nursing Now. And Harriet wrote to us afterwards, and she said, if it hadn't been for Nursing Now, I would never have been noticed in the world. And she said, here I am in an international journal being interviewed by a member of the royal family. And she said, Milcott, her organisation, has been recognised worldwide. And she said, I can't believe that the Duchess would interview somebody like me. And I just thought there are so many stories like this throughout the world, and a patchwork of those stories make a quilt.
What a powerful and effective image for a campaign to create. A patchwork of stories assembled as a beautifully rich and comforting quilt to surround us all. Established in 2018 and led with clear vision, Nurse Barbara Stilwell has served as the executive director of the 3-year Nursing Now global campaign to improve health for all by raising the status and profile of nursing. Nursing Now has united nurses, health advocates, and allies from around the world in the first ever global movement to champion the role of nurses and highlight the need for nurses to be in consequential leadership and policy-making roles at the highest levels of government, health systems, and health policy forums. In the 3 years since its launch, Nursing Now grew to have a presence in 126 countries with over 700 groups around the world actively sharing how they are innovating and creating the solutions needed in their communities. Interrupted, but not daunted by the COVID-19 pandemic, Nursing Now connected tens of thousands of nurses across the world through virtual events and social media, making the case to decision makers globally of the critical importance of investing in nurses to achieve health for all. In 2019, Nursing Now launched the Nightingale Challenge and inspired over 700 employers to develop the leadership skills of over 30,000 early career nurses and midwives. And while the campaign reaches its culmination in May of 2021, its mission and legacy will continue on through the Nursing Now Challenge and carry forward the ambitious mandate of the Nightingale Challenge, working with health employers around the world to create leadership development opportunities for 100,000 nurses and midwives in more than 150 countries by the end of 2022. Combined with the unexpected amplification of the COVID-19 pandemic and the rapid adoption of many nurse-led innovations, the World Health Organization's designation of 2020 as the International Year of the Nurse and Midwife and the Nursing Now campaign have shown a blindingly bright global spotlight on nursing and created a powerful network of nurses around the world. The Nursing Now Challenge and its network of partners and nurse champions will build on this legacy as we continue to recover from the pandemic and more deeply understand how vital nursing is in all aspects of health innovation and healthcare. For See You Now, I'm Shawna Butler. Thanks for listening.
Johnson & Johnson is proud to power up nurse-led innovation that is transforming health outcomes through skill building, leadership development, and more. The American Nurses Association ignites and celebrates nurse-led innovation to redefine quality nursing and advance healthcare for all. Learn more at seeyounowpodcast.com.